Good evening, everyone. My name is Arthur Flug. I'm the Executive Director of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College, and I'd like to welcome you here. I'd also like to welcome you here on behalf of the Queens Jewish Community Council, and the President Warren Hecht is here, and also on behalf of the Northeast Queens Jewish Community Council. Jack Friedman, the president, is outside because Jack is always working no matter what he does, and he'll be inside shortly. Tonight we have what I thought was going to be an unusual event, and that was that we're going to have someone here from another part of the world, Dr. Alberto Nisman, be our guest speaker. Usually as director of the Holocaust Center, everyone I introduce as a guest speaker is usually a scholar in the Holocaust, and usually from the United States or Europe or Israel. We broke that pattern 2 weeks ago where, unfortunately, many of you who are here now came to another such type meeting as we're having tonight at the Hillcrest Jewish Center, where we had a guest speaker, or two guest speakers, talk about the bombing of a synagogue in Caracas, Venezuela. It's being investigated. Tonight, we're also going to go into such a unique thing. Last Friday, when I met with my group of Holocaust survivors, I told them about tonight's event. And I said that we're going to have a guest speaker here. That speaker is going to talk about a community center that was blown up, and I was surprised at how many people there knew about it. And when I talked to them about it, I found out that tragically I made a mistake, because they all knew about the bombing of the community center, but one was referring to the bombing of the community center in Czestochowa, Poland. Another was talking about the bombing of a community center in Baden-Baden, Germany. A third was talking about the bombing of a community center in Jasenovac, Yugoslavia. And it was tragic in the sense that while they could relate to it and appreciate the importance of this meeting, what they were referring to happened 64 years ago. And today we're here to continue a story about the bombing of a community center that took place. In working our way into the program, I'd like to introduce someone who is a very fervent supporter of the Holocaust Center and human rights in general, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, and that's the president of Queensborough Community College, Dr. Eduardo J. Marti.
Thank you, Arthur. Can you all hear me back there? And we have a problem in that we have too many students. That's never a problem. But we have, on Tuesday nights, we have one of our most popular nights, so the parking lot is kind of full, so parking is very difficult. That's why people are straggling in little by little. I'm certain that as we go forward in the program, we'll see more individuals coming. So on behalf of Queensborough Community College, permit me to extend a heartfelt welcome to General Counsel Asaf Sharif, the Israeli General Counsel, and the Honorable Alberto Nisman, Argentina's Minister on Terrorism, Mr. Edward O'Callaghan, former Chief of National Security Unit of the United States Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York, and Harlan Levy, anti-terrorism prosecutor, and to all of you who have come to participate in this very important event. This event, sponsored by the Kupferberg Holocaust Resource Center and Archives, is part of our mission. Our mission is to combat prejudice, especially institutionalized prejudice, wherever and whenever we recognize it. Our mission is to inculcate upon our students' minds the importance of civic responsibility, of assuming their rightful place in our society while understanding and appreciating other cultures and traditions. To use the Holocaust as a vivid example of what can happen if we allow prejudice to flourish, we know that when prejudice is institutionalized, it gains strength, and the only possible outcome of institutionalized prejudice is violence and bloodshed. Tonight, we hear for the first time in New York the prosecutor who formally accused the government of Iran of directing the bombing and accused Hezbollah of carrying out the bombing that killed 85 and injured 300 in Buenos Aires in 1994. The Argentinian government at that time was at best incompetent or at worst in collusion, as the investigation resulted in the acquittal of all suspects in 2004. We're fortunate that Dr. Nisman will enlighten us with the details of the case. Even though the event took place on July 18 of 1994, it is not over. Just this week, Claudio Lifshitz was kidnapped and tortured by men that identified themselves as members of the CIDE, or the internal forces, investigatory forces of the government. Lifshitz, who also worked as a lawyer for the Argentine Federal Police and worked on the investigation into the local connections of the bombing until he was removed from the case. Lifshitz testified that the judge, Juan Jose Galeano, mishandled the investigation, including allegedly making a $400,000 bribe to a key witness. Galeano was taken off the AMIA investigation in 2003 and was removed from his position as a judge in 2005. The investigation of the AMIA bombings has dragged on for 15 years, with no indictments and a series of accusations of cover-ups and corruption. I am certain that you, as I, look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you all for being here. This is a tremendous and important night for the Holocaust Resource Center of our college. Thank you again. Before I take my seat, I'd like to recognize a very important individual who has also joined us as well, and that is the president of Queens College, Jim Meiskens. Jim?
Thank you, Dr. Marti, and thank you, President Meiskens. When we teach about the Holocaust, one of the greatest assets we have is something we call survivors. You're all familiar with that. In addressing the program tonight, in order to give you a background of what took place in Argentina, we have not really a survivor, but an eyewitness and a person who was there at the time. And I'd like to introduce the rabbi of the Hillcrest Jewish Center, Rabbi Manis Kogan. Rabbi Kogan.
Thank you, Dr. Flug, and thank you everybody for coming to this evening. I would like just to speak briefly on my own involvement in 1994 in the AMIA case, which was as a rabbi, as a congregational rabbi. When we found that morning, I went to my office. I was told by my secretary that the AMIA was bombed. The AMIA is not just a community center like a JCC, but it's the center of the Jewish community in Argentina, which is one of the main two organizations of Argentinian Jewry. We went, everybody went running to the neighborhood of Once, where the AMIA was located, and the entire place was closed already by police and by rescue forces, so we couldn't come close. We found out very soon that there were many people that we knew or we knew about them that were trapped in the building. One of them was the wife of Rabbi Angel Kreiman, a colleague of us, a conservative rabbi in Argentina, and who 3 days later she was confirmed dead. She was working in the AMIA as a social worker. Our main role as community rabbis was go to immediately they set an operations center in the other AMIA building, 3 blocks from where the bomb took place, and they asked the rabbis to help deliver the news once they found the bodies of those who were, after they removed the bodies and from the AMIA, to inform the families that were waiting there days and nights. Silvia was reminding me we were married, then Daniela was not born yet, and we spent the entire night and day there for 3 days until they were telling us that they found the bodies, and we went to the families who were there waiting, having coffee, and they took turns to tell them that their loved ones were found out, and then to arrange and to help with all the funeral and the burial procedures. It was very, very difficult time, especially for me that I was ordained only 1 year at that time. We have rabbis who had more experience helping us on how to address the parents, how to address the siblings. We have cases in which 2 siblings died, and certainly was interesting because many non-Jews also work in the AMIA, and many passerbys in the street were killed as well. And many people who didn't know where their loved ones were, they went just there to find out information like you see in the movies, but that was a real case. So this is my involvement there. I would like just to say a couple more words about what the event meant for Argentinian jury. This is, again, my personal opinion. Maybe some of the other speakers or other people who were there may have a different opinion. For me, it meant before and after in Argentinian jury. Many things happened. I think it's like a 9/11 here, but for the life of Judaism in Argentina. First of all, immediately after that, it was impossible to go to any Jewish building without being scrutinized and going through security. All the Jewish buildings, they have like barricades in the front, and they still have it today, that people need to go through security. And if we talk today about welcoming congregations, certainly this is not something that helps people who are in the periphery or not affiliated to go and to go into a Jewish community when you need to be searched, when you need to be asked for an ID. And it really, as I say, meant before and after in our communities. This, I think, will be the time in which many Argentinian rabbis started leaving the country. I was probably one of the first one after 1994, but many after found different places because the conditions were not the best ones in Argentina. Not necessarily related to that, but I think as a consequence, and really the atmosphere changed. One of the things that happened also is that this feeling that probably Dr. Nisman is going to speak also on how the Argentinians, we grew up with fear to the police, with fear to the military, and with fear to the judges, of the judges. It's something that is very difficult maybe to understand here. Today I went for my first day to jury duty, and just the fact that I, being a citizen here only 2 years, will be invited to be a juror and be part of the judiciary system is something totally new for something who grew up in a country like Argentina, like myself. Part of this lack of trust, part of understanding that you cannot have friends in the government, that everybody is subject to being bribed. Although those are things that we knew than before, I think it became more evident after 1994. So certainly the bombing of the AMIA not only affected the people who were touched in particular by the bombing, the families, the relatives, but it affected the entire Jewish community and I think the society in general. I was just commenting with Sylvia that immediately after the bombing of the AMIA, many people who did not want to leave close to a synagogue, to a Jewish club, to a Jewish JCC. The value of the houses nearby started going down in value, and you can just imagine what did that for the Jews in Argentina, although we found some solidarity as well, so you cannot put everybody in the same group. But it was a very, very difficult time, and I think the consequences are still felt even today. So just to give you a glimpse of what happened there, and thank you for your invitation, Dr. Flug.
Thank you, Rabbi. The chances of getting two rabbis in a panel in Queens together, no problem whatsoever. The chances of getting two rabbis, both from Argentina, on a panel together is almost like winning the lottery, which we could use right now. However, saying that, one of our staff members, who is our scholar in residence at the Kupferberg Holocaust Center, is a native of Argentina, is very, very much involved in the Holocaust education community, and was one of our main speakers at our event where we discussed the event in Caracas. And I'd like to call up Rabbi Isidore Eisenberg to introduce our guest tonight. Rabbi Eisenberg.
Thank you, Dr. Flug. I'd like to echo the words of my colleague, Rabbi Kogan, and emphasize and underline how much and to what extent it's true, and we ought to walk out this evening from the understanding that there was a before and after. It was before 18 July 94, and it is after. Argentine Jewish history is always going to be looked at from that point of view. And those who were responsible for the bombing knew exactly what they were doing and where they planted the bomb. And there is nothing that I can give you to understand here this evening to even begin to understand what the AMIA is all about. We call it community center. There is nothing in the United States that I was driving here tonight on the LIE, and I was saying to myself, is there anything in America comparable to the AMIA? I cannot think of anything. It's not a community center, it's not a school, it's not a library, it's not a sports club, it's everything. Everything I said was in the AMIA. It was the major Jewish and Yiddish, that is, and Jewish Argentine literature library, the EVO library, was in that building. There was a high school in that building, social services, cultural activities. I grew up there. And suddenly it all went up in smoke and destruction. And so I am pleased and honored this evening to have been called upon to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Alberto Nisman, that I'd like to welcome, and I want you to be aware of the fact that I don't know how he is sitting straight and even talking to us or be able to talk to us, since he flew the whole night, and I know that flight from Buenos Aires to New York. You don't sleep. It's a 10.5-hour flight. Before they turn off the lights, it's already 2 hours later, 2.5 hours later. An hour before you land, they already turn on the lights to serve you breakfast. So there is a little 6 hour there in between. Who can sleep during those hours? So they're here, and they have been on the go from the moment they arrived at 6 a.m. this morning, he and his wife. So the fact that he's here is truly almost heroic. But I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Nisman, who was born like Rabbi Kogan and myself in Buenos Aires, where he obtained a law degree from the Universidad Nacional de Buenos Aires, which is the national university, the main university in Buenos Aires, of course, the capital of Argentina. His career as an attorney began 23 years ago, working uninterruptedly until his appointment as Argentina's Prosecutor General in 1995. Since then, he has taken an active role in many trials, and some of them making headlines, representing the government in cases of terrorism, drugs, money laundering, arms and explosives trafficking. You get the idea. Nothing fun. Due to Dr. Nisman's vast experience in complex cases, he was appointed to represent the Ministry of Public Prosecution in what became perhaps the most significant and complex case that the justice system of Argentina had to deal with, and that is the case of the AMIA bombing on July 18, 1994. He achieved an outstanding record in the oral trial against the so-called local connection of the bombing. He has headed the special unit in charge of the AMIA case since February 2005. That's more or less going about 4 years. While carrying out these responsibilities, Dr. Nisman has also been on the faculty of both the National University of Buenos Aires and Belgrano University, published papers relating to law and to his specialty in the practice of law and prosecution, and was also, together with other colleagues, responsible for publishing a penal procedure law manual published by the University of Belgrano, University of Belgrano, in whatever case, whatever way you want to call it. It just happens that, as I said earlier, Dr. Nisman arrived early, and yet he has been on the go the whole day, and the day has not finished for him, not yet at least. In good Argentinian style, I asked him when I came in whether he had had any dinner. And he said he didn't have an opportunity. And then I remember that we will be through, I imagine, by 9:30. That's when Argentinians start having dinner. So that will be just on time for him and his missus to have dinner. But in between, he had lunch with Consul General of Israel, Asaf Sharif, who is honoring us here with his presence, and also with the Israel ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Carmon. And it's one of those rare, what shall I say, mina shamayim, from heaven kind of encounters, in the fact that Ambassador Carmon is one of those who lost his wife in a bombing of the Israeli embassy in Argentina 2 years before the AMIA bombing, that is in 1992. So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Alberto Nisman. I'm going to be translating. He's going to be speaking Spanish, and I'll be translating. Maybe. Yeah. Is it? I can use the right. Hello? Hello? Yeah, okay.
Bueno, buenas noches. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer a las autoridades del Centro de Estudio del Holocausto por haberme invitado y quiero decirles que es un honor para mí estar con todos ustedes.
I want to first of all thank all the members of the Kuferberg Holocaust Center and the college for having invited me and to have the pleasure to be with all of you here.
La República Argentina fue víctima del terrorismo fundamentalista islámico en dos oportunidades. En el año 1992 con el ataque a la Embajada de Israel y en el año 1994 con el ataque a la sede de la AMIA, que a mí me toca investigar este último hecho.
The Argentine Republic has been the victim of Islamic fundamentalist terrorism on 2 occasions, in 1992 with the bombing of the Israeli embassy, and in 1994 with the bombing of the AMIA, and I'm responsible now for the prosecution of the AMIA bombing.
El atentado a la sede de la AMIA produjo, como ustedes sabrán, 85 muertes, más de 200 heridos y una incuantificable cantidad de daños materiales.
The bombing of the AMIA, as you may know, was the result of the bombing were 85 people dead, 200 wounded, and a tremendous amount of material damage.
En el año 2004, y luego de 11 años de investigación, culminó un juicio oral a un grupo de ex policías de Argentina acusados de integrar la conexión local del atentado.
In 2004, we came to the end of an oral trial of a number of police, members of the Argentine police, who were involved as a local connection of the bombing of the AMIA.
En ese juicio los acusados terminaron absueltos y se terminó probando que toda la investigación se había hecho sobre base de prueba falsa obtenida por un juez corrupto que había pagado a un imputado $400.000 para que diera una versión de los hechos distinta a lo que realmente había ocurrido.
I'm amazed myself to what I'm listening. I know it, and yes, it was discovered afterwards that all the proof that was brought forth in order to accuse these police people had been all falsified. Yeah, it had been falsified, and then it was discovered that even the judge who was responsible for handling the case had been bribed with a bribe of $400,000 in order to whitewash the whole case.
Hubo que empezar una investigación luego de ocurrido 11 años del hecho, prácticamente de cero, sin ninguna evidencia concreta.
We had to start 11 years after the event. We had to start once again the investigation as if nothing had happened from the very beginning.
Es decir, que a las dificultades propias que tiene investigar un hecho terrorista y más después de tanto tiempo, se sumaba que toda la evidencia que se había juntado era en su gran mayoría falsa.
And imagine that with the passing of time, 11 years after that, not only did we have to start from the beginning, but we also came to the conclusion that all the evidence that was gathered was not correct. It was false evidence.
En el año 2005, por decisión del gobierno argentino, se forma una fiscalía especial dedicada exclusivamente a investigar este caso, compuesta por aproximadamente 40 profesionales que está a mi cargo.
In the year 2005, the Argentine government established a special prosecution office, of which Dr. Nisman is in charge of, with another 40 people under his direction who are investigating the case.
Logramos, entre otras medidas, que el gobierno argentino levantara el secreto sobre todos los archivos de los servicios de inteligencia de Estado existentes hasta ese momento, que era información clasificada y reservada.
One of the first things we succeeded in doing is that the Argentine government should lift all it had prohibited to enter and to have access to the archives, intelligence archives, and we succeeded that the government should lift these prohibitions so that we could have access to this documentation.
Se trataba, además de lo voluminoso que era la causa, solo de esta información de inteligencia, 1.700 carpetas de 400.000 fojas con evidencia reunida durante más de 11 años.
What we had to look through is 1,700 folios filled with documents that had been gathered in the course of 11 years.
Luego de 2 años de intensa investigación, logramos probar en octubre del año 2006
After a thorough investigation, we succeeded in proving in October of 2006
que el atentado contra la sede de la AMIA había sido ordenado, planificado y financiado por las máximas autoridades de la República Islámica de Irán de aquel entonces.
That we were able to prove that the bombing was planned, supported, paid for by the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran of those days.
La decisión de cometer el atentado contra la Argentina fue tomada casi un año antes del hecho, el 14 de agosto del año 93.
The decision in order to go ahead with the bombing was taken on 14th August of 1993.
Esto ocurrió en la ciudad iraní de Mashhad.
This took place in the Iranian city of Mashhad.
En esa reunión y en esa decisión intervinieron el expresidente iraní Ali Rafsanjani,
In that meeting, the president of Iran in those days was there, Ali Rafsanjani.
su ex canciller Ali Velayati,
His former Minister of Foreign Relations,
Ali Velayati,
Ali Derajati.
El ex ministro de Informaciones y de Inteligencia Ali Falahian,
Ali Farahian, the former Minister of Information and Intelligence.
Ahmad Rezaji, el ex jefe de la Guardia Revolucionaria de los Pasdaráns,
Ahmad Razafi, who was the former leader of the revolutionary forces.
y el jefe de un grupo especial de esta fuerza llamado Al-Quds, de apellido Bahidi.
And the head of a special unit called Al-Quds, whose name was Mahidi.
La ejecución material del atentado fue encomendada a la organización terrorista libanesa Hezbollah.
The actual carrying out of the bombing was given over to the Lebanese terrorist organization Hezbollah,
Que en este caso actuó como lo hace habitualmente, es decir, como un mero apéndice o un mero ejecutor de la voluntad de Teherán.
which in all cases works at the orders of on the orders of Tehran.
A quien se le encomendó formar el grupo operativo, el grupo que llevó adelante el ataque, es al recientemente, ya hace un año fallecido, ex jefe de los grupos especiales del Hezbollah, Imad Mougnier.
And Hezbollah was given the task to carry out the bombing, and this the head of that unit was the Imad Mougnier, that, as you may remember, was murdered or died about a year ago.
El motivo por el cual se decidió cometer este atentado contra la República Argentina fue la interrupción, la decisión de interrupción del gobierno argentino de los contratos que preveían un suministro de tecnología nuclear a la República Islámica de Irán.
The reason that it was decided to carry out the bombing was in reaction to the Argentine government's decision to suspend all dealings with the government of Iran in terms of assisting the government of Iran in nuclear technology and research.
En la década de los 80, Argentina integraba el movimiento de los países no alineados y como tal tenía mucha vinculación con Irán en ese entonces.
In the decade of the 80s, Argentina was part of the non-aligned countries, and its relations with Iran were very close.
Sumado a la circunstancia de que para Irán era muy importante el aporte que le hacía Argentina, porque ya varios países europeos, entre ellos Alemania y Francia, habían interrumpido justamente por las políticas iraníes la venta de estos materiales.
And this was particularly important for Iran since Germany and France had suspended all their relationship with Iran in terms of nuclear cooperation. And so the Argentine cooperation was particularly important for the government of Iran under those circumstances.
En la década de los 90 hay un cambio en la política exterior argentina.
In the decade of the 90s, there's a change in the foreign relations, in the managing of foreign relations of Argentina.
Y existió una sugerencia por parte del gobierno de Estados Unidos para que Argentina interrumpa esta provisión de material tecnológico nuclear a Irán.
And through the intervention of the United States, it prevailed upon Argentina to suspend its nuclear cooperation with Iran.
El argumento en términos diplomáticos que se utilizó fue que no se tenía la certeza de que Irán iba a utilizar esos materiales para fines pacíficos.
Because the point was made that it was considered that Iran was not going to use the nuclear know-how for peaceful purposes.
Ante este hecho, primero Argentina suspende estos contratos nucleares en agosto del año 91 y al poco tiempo ocurre el atentado a la Embajada de Israel.
Soon after, Argentina suspends its nuclear cooperation with Iran, and soon after, the bombing of the Argentine embassy takes place.
Como consecuencia del atentado, Argentina transforma esta suspensión de los contratos en una cancelación definitiva.
As a result, as a consequence of the bombing of the Israeli embassy, Argentina not only has suspended its nuclear cooperation with Iran, but now cuts it off altogether.
Unos meses más tarde se comienza a planificar el atentado a la sede de la AMIA.
A few months later, the bombing of the AMIA is being planned.
A esa reunión que les hablé del mes de agosto del 93 son convocados 2 iraníes que estaban viviendo en Argentina.
For that meeting that I mentioned earlier in the planning of the bombing, which took place in August of 93, 2 Iranians residing in Argentina were called to come as well.
Que hoy se encuentran con captura internacional, al igual que todos los iraníes que les mencioné antes.
Upon whom today there is a call for international they can be the Interpol has the possibility of being that to arrest them wherever they may be found in the world.
Una de esas personas, y que fue el epicentro del apoyo local aquí en Buenos Aires, fue el ex consejero cultural iraní en Buenos Aires, Moshe Rabbani.
Moshe Rabbani, who was the cultural attaché of Iran in Argentina, is one of those gentlemen upon whom there is this international warrant to be arrested.
Rabbani acude a esa reunión y fue él quien, que ya se encontraba hacía 11 años viviendo en Argentina, porque Rabbani llegó a Buenos Aires en el año 83.
And Rabbani had already been residing in Argentina for 11 years, since the year 83.
Y fue él quien propuso en esa reunión el blanco atacar como la sede de la AMIA.
And he is the one who proposed that the building or the institution to be bombed should be the AMIA.
Llevó 3 objetivos posibles, los otros 2 alternativos no los conocemos cuáles fueron, porque el primero que se trató, que fue el de la AMIA, fue aprobado, con lo cual los otros 2 ni siquiera se discutieron.
We don't know. He brought 3 possibilities, that is 3 targets to be bombed. And we don't know which the others were, because once AMIA was suggested, that is what was approved and agreed upon, and we never found out which the others were, which the other 2 were.
Inmediatamente después que regresa de Irán, en noviembre del año 93, es decir, 6-7 meses antes del atentado, inmediatamente que regresa de Irán, de esa reunión, 6 o 7 meses antes.
About 7 months after he returns to Iran after the bombing,
Rabbani abre una cuenta corriente en Buenos Aires, en el Deutsche Bank, que tuvo abierto solo por espacio de 3 meses y medio.
And Rabbani, when he returns from this meeting to Buenos Aires, opens a bank account which remained open for 3 or 3.5 months.
Donde se hicieron importantes giros de dinero desde Teherán, que fueron extraídos personalmente por Rabbani unos días y otros semanas antes del atentado.
Where important sums of funds were transferred directly from Iran a few weeks before the bombing.
La camioneta que se utiliza como coche bomba se deja estacionada en un estacionamiento muy cercano a la AMIA el viernes 15 de julio, es decir, 3 días antes del ataque.
The truck, the small truck that was used as the car bomb, is parked in a garage not far from the AMIA building 3 days before the bombing.
Rabbani supervisa esta entrega y se lo detecta realizando una llamada telefónica de su teléfono celular en las inmediaciones de este estacionamiento.
Rabbani is caught making a phone call on his cellular phone about very, very close to the AMIA building.
Como le dije antes, Rabbani llegó a Buenos Aires enviado por Irán 11 años antes y estaba viviendo en Argentina desde el año 83.
As I told you earlier, Rabbani had been sent to Argentina many years earlier and had been residing for 11 years since the year 83.
Su llegada a Buenos Aires tiene un claro objetivo, y esto era porque para el régimen iraní Argentina fue el primer país donde comenzó una avanzada de penetración, de infiltración y de conversión de la embajada iraní en una estación de inteligencia.
It was very important, the mission of Rabbani, because it was determined by the Iranian government to establish in Argentina that should be the front of an intelligence gathering operation centered with the Iranian mission in Buenos Aires.
Esta política exterior que se ve de este Estado terrorista que viene desarrollando hoy en día en varios países de Latinoamérica,
This is the kind of policy that we see being developed in several countries throughout Latin America.
tuvo su primera experiencia muchos años antes en Argentina de manera mucho más solapada, menos vistosa, si se quiere.
And we can see this took place in Argentina several years before in a form which is less elegant, one may say.
Y se eligió Argentina por dos motivos fundamentales. El primero porque en ese año, como ya les dije, integraba Argentina el país de no alineados y tenía una relación muy amistosa con Irán.
And the reason Argentina was chosen because, as I told you earlier, Argentina was part of the non-aligned countries and it also had good relations with Iran.
Y en segundo motivo porque ya habían enviado antes de Rabani a otro enviado, otro agregado, otra persona, también un sheikh de apellido Hosseini.
Y también, and also because years earlier they had sent another attaché by the name of Hosseini,
Que había verificado, había detectado que en Argentina había una cultura del antisemitismo fundamentalmente en las Fuerzas Armadas y de Seguridad, con lo cual creían que era un terreno fértil para propagar una visión extrema del Islam.
because Iran had detected that in Argentina there was a milieu of anti-Semitism that was known, and therefore they felt that there would be fertile ground in order to develop the kind of policy that the government of Iran wanted to get started in Argentina.
Es así como comenzaron a llegar desde Irán a Argentina muchos agentes de inteligencia camuflados obviamente bajo otras actividades.
And that's how several intelligence agents arrived in Argentina, obviously not as such, but under the cover of other responsibilities in the Iranian representation.
Fundamentalmente se dividían en tres grupos los que venían. Algunos eran taxistas, fundamentalmente por la posibilidad que le da esta actividad de tener con el auto, dar vueltas y parar en determinados lugares sin levantar sospechas y obtener información.
There were three groups. One is there were taxi drivers, because when you have the opportunity while you drive a taxi to go around and to observe and to see and to look and no one would pay attention to what you're doing as a taxi driver.
Otros se inscribían como alumnos regulares de facultades, fundamentalmente de la Facultad de Medicina, que les permitía quizás mantenerse más tiempo estudiando, o estudiantes crónicos. Medicina en Argentina es una carrera que a veces demora mucho más tiempo, o hay estudiantes que se toman muchísimo tiempo para estudiar, entonces les permitía estar en ese lugar, justificar la actividad que desarrollaban e ir interactuando con diversos estamentos de la sociedad para obtener también información.
And the other group were students in the School of Medicine in Buenos Aires, because the School of Medicine in Argentina is the career is a longer one, the course of study is a longer one, and this allowed the students to mingle with others and to stay in touch and to make contact with other levels of society as they were students. And not only that, even if you're a dormant student, you are part of the student society, so to say, and you can gather intelligence as you under the cover of being a student.
Y a su vez a esa gente se le empleaba en lo que nosotros llamamos empresas de cobertura, que eran empresas fantasma que no tenían actividad, que registraban siempre pérdidas, pero que todos estos empleados cobraban sueldos altísimos, sueldos siderales.
And there were also several companies in which these people were employed, and then we found out that these were phantom companies, that they were not doing anything, but the employees were getting fabulous salaries, obviously from other sources.
Estos grupos después sirvieron de apoyo a los elementos locales que actuaron acá para el atentado.
These are the groups
Para los dos atentados.
These are the groups that later were the support system for those who actually carried out both the bombing of the embassy and of the AMIA.
La prueba fundamental de todo esto que les digo, fundamentalmente de que la decisión fue tomada por las más altas autoridades de la República Islámica de Irán,
And I want to repeat and emphasize that the decision to carry out these bombings were taken by the highest authorities of the Iranian government.
es el testimonio de varios testigos que han declarado acerca de esta responsabilidad iraní. Por ejemplo, un expresidente iraní, Bani Sadr, que fue el primer presidente puesto por la Revolución Islámica, un hombre de riñón del Ayatolá Khomeini.
This has been supported by evidence that has been gathered and people who came forward to tell us that, and particularly, you may remember, by Bani Sadr, who was the first prime minister of Iran and was the right hand of Khomeini at that time.
Otro de los muchos que hay muy relevantes, le voy a mencionar uno más solo para no cansarlos, es el ex cofundador de los servicios de inteligencia iraní del régimen teocrático.
Another one who came forward was the head of Iranian intelligence of the theocratic regime.
El señor Mesbahi era quien tenía a su cargo, él ha dicho y ha reconocido que tenía a su cargo llevar adelante todas las operaciones terroristas que realizaba el régimen de Irán en Europa.
Mr. Misbahi was the one who was responsible for carrying out all the decisions in terms of terrorism on behalf of the Iranian government in Europe.
Fue el testigo principal y la columna vertebral de la condena a los agentes iraníes en el caso Mykonos.
He was the main source for condemning those responsible for the Mykonos case.
Se lo conoce con este nombre porque es el asesinato llevado a cabo por agentes iraníes en la ciudad de Berlín, en un bar que se llamaba Mykonos.
It's because it is called Mykonos because of the terrorist attempt in Germany in a bar that was known as Mykonos.
En ese hecho fueron asesinados varios militantes del Partido Revolucionario Kurdo que eran contrarios al régimen de Teherán.
In that attempt, several members of the Kurdish resistance were murdered because they were opposed, of course, to the Iranian regime.
A partir de esta confesión, Alemania le ha dado protección a este testigo y actualmente se encuentra viviendo en Alemania y ha testificado también en la causa AMIA.
And since then, Germany has protected this particular witness, and he has also come forward to testify in the AMIA case.
Es muy importante señalar que en este caso Mykonos, uno de los iraníes condenados se trata de Qasem Darabi.
It should be emphasized that one of the Iranians that have been accused is Qasem
Darabi.
Darabi.
¿Quién es Qasem Darabi? Darabi era el rabani de Alemania, era el agregado cultural iraní en Alemania, cumplía las mismas funciones que rabani en Argentina, pero en Alemania.
Who was Darabi? Darabi was had the same position that Rabbani had in Argentina. Both were cultural attachés, but their responsibilities were the same, for one in Germany and for the other in Argentina.
Darabi en Alemania fue detenido y condenado a cadena perpetua.
Darabi was arrested and condemned to prison for life.
Evidentemente los iraníes aprendieron de sus propios errores y meses antes del atentado de la AMIA, para evitar justamente esto, lo que hicieron fue dotar a Rabbani de inmunidad diplomática.
And the Iranians, having learned from the Darabi case several months before the bombing, gave Rabbani diplomatic cover.
Como dije, 4 meses antes, y de esta forma evitaron que Rabbani fuera detenido por el atentado a la sede de la AMIA.
And that's how they prevented for Rabbani to be arrested because of the AMIA bombing.
Pudimos determinar también que el inmolado, la persona que condujo el coche bomba que se estrelló contra la sede de la AMIA,
We were also able to prove that the person who was driving the car bomb, who died, of course, in the bombing,
fue un militante del Hezbollah, del movimiento terrorista Hezbollah, de nombre Ibrahim Berro.
Was also a member of the Hezbollah by the name of Ibrahim Berro.
Logramos individualizar ya hace 2 años, en el mes de agosto, de septiembre del 2005, a 2 hermanos de él que estaban y están viviendo y trabajando actualmente en Estados Unidos, en Detroit.
And we have been able to identify 2 of his brothers who are at the present time working right here in the United States in Detroit.
Esos hermanos evidentemente emigraron a Estados Unidos porque veían el futuro que les esperaba en el Líbano con estos movimientos terroristas. Su padre era un viejo militante de otra agrupación terrorista, en este caso Palestina, Al-Fatah.
And they saw what was coming, and as their father was a member of the terrorist organization Al-Fatah, and therefore they made their way to the United States.
Y con esos testimonios y otra prueba logramos demostrar que esta persona era quien se había inmolado en la AMIA.
And with this evidence, we were able to prove that this was the person who was the suicide bomber in the AMIA case.
Hezbolá, para fraguar esta muerte, porque Hezbolá, como se trataba de un ataque fuera del sur del Líbano, no lo reconoció públicamente, y para fraguar esta muerte declaró en un medio periodístico de ellos que esta persona había muerto, pero en un ataque contra fuerzas israelíes en el Líbano en octubre del 94, es decir, 2 meses después.
The Iranians tried to cover up what happened to Ibrahim Berro, and they said that he had actually died in a fight with the Israeli armed forces 2 months before he committed in the suicide bombing of the AMIA.
Comprobamos que todo esto era una mentira,
We were able to prove that all this was a lie.
que el funeral que se hizo por Ibrahim Hussein Berro en el Líbano fue sin su cuerpo, esto reconocido por los propios hermanos.
And that the funeral that took place for Ibrahim Berro in Lebanon was a fraud, and his brothers testified to that fact.
Que a la ceremonia acudió Hassan Nasrallah, el jefe del Hezbolá, en homenaje a este hecho.
And that to that funeral, Nasrallah himself came to the funeral of this Berro.
Que su discurso fue filmado por la televisión libanesa.
And his speech was filmed by the Lebanese TV.
Y ahí dijo que había que honrar, señalando al padre, a ese hombre porque había entregado 2 suicidas a la causa del Hezbolá.
And he pointed to the father of this Berro that he should be honored for having given 2 suicide bombers for the cause of Hezbollah.
El primero al que hizo referencia sin nombrarlo fue el sheikh Hassan Berro, que se inmoló en el año 85 en el sur del Líbano contra fuerzas de defensas israelíes.
The first one was Hassan Berro, who was a suicide bomber against Israeli forces in 85.
Y el otro al que no hizo referencia era justamente Ibrahim Berro, inmolado también con un ataque suicida contra la sede del AMIA.
And the second one was Ibrahim Berro, the one who was driving the truck bomb in the bombing of the AMIA.
Probamos también que Berro ingresó a la Argentina por la triple frontera, ese punto de unión donde convergen las fronteras de Argentina, Brasil y Paraguay, que está repleto de terroristas.
We were also able to prove that Ibrahim Berro made it to Argentina, coming through that point where we know where Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina meet together in the border, and which is full of terrorist elements.
Y detectamos también otro elemento muy importante, que es que unos días antes del atentado a la AMIA, el 12 de julio del 94, hubo un llamado de la mezquita de Foz de Iguazú a un familiar de Berro en el Líbano.
And we were able to find out that 2 days before the bombing of the AMIA, there was a phone call from Ibrahim Berro from Foz de Iguazú, which is in the north of Argentina, near the Iguazú Falls, to some relatives in Lebanon.
Esto en principio aparecía como un elemento claro que indicaba que el suicida había pasado por ahí y había llamado días antes de inmolarse a su familia.
It is clear from that evidence that he had called his family in Lebanon 2 days before he committed suicide in the bombing.
Pero también pensamos que podíamos equivocarnos en nuestra postura y que quizás había algún militante o alguna persona en Foz de Iguazú que tenía algún familiar y llamaba permanentemente o todas las semanas a algún familiar en el Líbano, que podía no ser el inmolado.
But it's possible we may be mistaken, but maybe somebody else who was calling every day, every week to family members in Lebanon, and may not have been the one who was killed in the bombing.
Por ese motivo pedimos todas las llamadas registradas desde esa mezquita del Líbano de Foz de Iguazú y otras cercanas realizadas desde 1 año antes y 2 años después.
And that's why we asked for all the records of the phone calls that took place from that mosque in Foz de Iguazú a year before and 2 years after the bombing.
Y detectamos que nunca antes ni nunca después hubo otra llamada aparte de esa. Fue la única llamada que existió a esa familia en el Líbano, con lo cual terminamos de corroborar que era el aviso de que esta persona había llegado bien a la triple frontera y que estaba lista ya para cometer el ataque.
And therefore, we were able to prove that this was the only call that was made to this family in Lebanon, that he called 2 days 2 days before the bombing, and therefore there were no other calls either before or after.
Con toda esta evidencia fuimos a comienzo del año 2007 a Interpol, donde les pedimos que las capturas que habíamos dictado se les imprimiera un código de prioridad de búsqueda, lo que se llama el alerta roja, las noticias rojas.
And therefore we turned afterwards to Interpol and we asked that all these guilty be given red notices to be arrested wherever they may be found.
Obviamente hubo oposición de Irán, con lo cual, justamente argumentando que la justicia argentina no era creíble por las irregularidades que habían ocurrido en el pasado en esta causa.
And Iran protested because it said that the irregularities that had taken place in the cause in the years before didn't justify what Argentina was deciding now.
Luego de un largo proceso en el cual tuvimos que explicar toda la evidencia nueva con la cual contábamos,
And after a long process where we had to show all the evidence that we had gathered so far,
la cuestión se sometió a votación y en el Comité Ejecutivo de Interpol, de 12 países que votaron, de un total de 13, porque uno estaba ausente, Argentina ganó esa votación por 12-0.
and it brought all the evidence to Interpol, and in a vote taken by the nations represented in Interpol, 12 out of 13 nations, one wasn't present, agreed with the position taken by Argentina.
Donde no solo votaron a favor de Argentina países de los cuales se podía esperar ese voto, como Estados Unidos, Francia, España o Alemania,
And the vote was not only from countries where we could have expected that kind of reaction, like the United States, France, and Germany, and Spain,
sino que también votaron a favor de Argentina países con fuertes vínculos con Irán, como Rusia, Marruecos y fundamentalmente Argelia, un país musulmán.
and but also Russia, Russia,
Rusia y
and Algiers, which is a Muslim country, of course, also voted for this case being brought to Interpol.
En la Asamblea General, donde votaron todos los países, y pese a la enorme presión y lobby que ejerció Irán, Argentina se impuso en la votación ya definitiva y general por 78 votos a favor y 14 en contra.
And even in the UN General Assembly, Argentina succeeded in a voting of 78 for and 14 against that the case should be approved by the United Nations. That is, the United Nations should go along with it.
Luego con esta decisión que Irán sometió a conocimiento de Interpol, pese a esto, Irán es un país que no colabora con la justicia argentina, no contesta nuestros requerimientos judiciales.
In spite of all that, of course, Iran does not cooperate either with Argentina or with international norms of justice.
Protege a los terroristas y les da cargos públicos en su actual gobierno.
It protects terrorists and gives them official positions in the government.
Por eso entiendo que es muy importante una presión por parte de la comunidad internacional, una exigencia a este país.
That's why I believe that it is so important that international pressure should be placed upon this country.
Para que este país que protege terroristas, para este país que está fuertemente comprometido con el terrorismo, entregue de una vez por todas a estos ciudadanos acusados por la justicia argentina.
That we should continue to pressure so that this country will once and for all hand over those who are accused by Argentine justice for having committed the bombing.
Simultáneamente nosotros ya estamos haciendo lugar a pedidos que realizan familiares de las víctimas.
And at the same time, we are proceeding with requests being made by members of the families of the victims.
De reclamos de un resarcimiento patrimonial.
That there should be a financial compensation.
Y en una demanda iniciada por un sobreviviente del atentado en Buenos Aires, que yo tramito, que yo investigo.
And a request from one of the survivors of the bombing that I'm investigating.
Ya hemos logrado embargar recientemente en Buenos Aires un total de 10 propiedades a nombre del ex agregado cultural Moyen Rabani.
We have been able to take 10 properties which are in Buenos Aires and which belong to this Moshe Rabani that we mentioned earlier.
Que inexplicablemente todavía las tenía a su nombre.
Who inexplicably still have these properties under his own name.
Y simultáneamente estamos realizando investigaciones en varios países europeos donde tenemos indicios de que estas personas tienen cuentas corrientes con importantes sumas de dinero.
And we are investigating in Europe because we suspect that many of these people have important sums of money in European banks.
Todo nuestro esfuerzo actualmente y desde el primer momento está puesto en llevar adelante las acciones y acompañar a las víctimas y a los familiares de las víctimas.
Our main purpose is to carry this forward and to accompany the members of the families of the victims.
Evidentemente nadie va a poder devolverle su vida,
We cannot give them back their lives.
pero lo poco que está a nuestro alcance, que es embargar las propiedades y llevarlos a la cárcel, es lo que vamos a intentar permanentemente hasta el último de nuestros días.
And at least to take all the property that they have and finally, eventually bring those who were guilty to jail. This is something that we will continue doing for the rest of our lives.
Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Nisman. I kept rolling around in my head, and I forget who said it, but the quote is that for evil to triumph, all you need is men of goodwill to do nothing. And to see what Dr. Nisman did, it was not simply as a lawyer getting up and going to work in the morning. Security was involved, and you'll hear more about that later. I want to recognize two people who have joined us tonight, Susie Tannenbaum, Special Assistant to Borough President Helen Marshall, and Corey Barak, Chairman of the Northeast Queens Jewish Community Council. Thank you both. Whoever becomes the Consul General of Israel in New York automatically becomes part of our family. It's sort of automatically adopted, and we had many legendary people who have served as the Consul General of Israel in New York, and one who was added to that legend is someone who's certainly no stranger on the campus of Queensborough Community College, and no stranger to anyone here, and I'd like to call upon him, Consul General Asaf Sharif.
Thank you. Rabbi, you're going to translate from Hebrew, too?
Necessary?
No, it's okay. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here, and I want to thank everybody who was involved in arranging this event, and I want to thank Dr. Nisman, not only for his work, but for his very important and informative speech. Thank you for that. As the President said, earlier today, I had the privilege of eating lunch with Dr. Nisman and two of my colleagues, Deputy Ambassador to the UN, Danny Carmon, who lost his wife in Buenos Aires in March 1992, a mother of 4 kids, and another colleague of mine, Danny Biran, who was also in Buenos Aires in 1992, and his wife was severely injured. And for them to meet Dr. Nisman, they were so excited about it. And I saw them before the lunch and during the lunch. For them, it gives you a sense of what an important job Dr. Nisman is doing. And again, on behalf of my colleagues, thank you. The story of my colleagues is unfortunately very common in Israel, because we live in a country that suffers from terror on a daily basis. I think there are 61 years of independence. I don't think we have one day of quiet. Some would say, and rightly so, that terror started in Israel even before the state were established. We hear more and more stories like Dr. Nisman heard today on a personal stories. But the war against terror is not an Israeli thing. Dr. Nisman mentioned Imad Mornia, who was in charge of the terrorist attack in 92 and 94. The fact is that with the exception of Osama bin Laden, Imad Mornia murdered more Americans than any other person in the world. And he was number 2 on the most wanted list of the FBI for many years, and until he left the world 13 months ago. And it shows you that it's not about Israel or Jewish people, it's about the free world, and this is what we need to remember. Now, I tried to do my homework before I came here, and I looked at how many terrorist attacks were reported in the first 68 days of this year, since January 1st, 2009. Any guess, President? Somebody want to try? 79. 79 terrorist attacks on the first 68 days of the world, of this year. Now, how many of you heard about 79 terrorist attacks? Probably you heard about one. Now, sometimes it makes us really mad when you see events like an Iranian ship full with weapons and all kinds of artillery going from Iran to Syria on its way to Hezbollah is being stopped, and you cannot read about it in the New York Times or watch it in 60 Minutes, and this has happened 2 months ago. And again, Dr. Nisman mentioned President Rafsanjani, who was in charge of this famous meeting in 1993, when people are talking about the moderate people in Iran, and they're hoping for a change or a new regime in Iran, they are talking, among others, about President Rafsanjani. So he is the moderate one. It gives you a sense about what moderate really means in Iran. So sometimes it really makes us mad that you cannot read about it, but sometimes it's not a bad thing. What we saw after the Mumbai attack, that the terrorists really happy when they get the press covered of what they are doing. So sometimes we're happy that they are not getting the coverage, because the best thing for us, and for us I mean everybody who is a member of the free world, to fight against terrorism is two things. First is to continue to live your life according to your beliefs and according to the way you want to live them. And the second issue, and maybe it's more important, is to pursue justice. And the fact that we have a person like Dr. Nisman here and many former DAs and people who dedicate their life to fight against terrorism, if we'll have more people like that, I'm convinced that in the war against terror, we'll have the upper hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shuri. Thank you. Now, let's get to the national. We've talked about international figures. Now, let's just go briefly to the national scene. I'd like to call upon Edward O'Callaghan, former chief of the Terrorism National Security Unit of the U.S. of the Southern District, to brief us on what is taking place and what has taken place regarding this situation. Edward?
Thank you very much, and thank you all for the kind invitation to be here tonight. I'd like to especially thank my friend Steven Salzberg for the personal invitation to have me here this evening. I would like to just echo the sentiments of the speakers before me in that the war against terrorism, the effort against terrorism really is a global effort. And what we have seen here in the United States in the course of the prosecutions that have been brought, particularly in the Southern District of New York, which goes back to the original World Trade Center bombing in 1993, is an expansion of the international effort and, frankly, an effort to broaden the types of cases that we can bring. The effort since 2001 of the Department of Justice and of the federal prosecutor's office across the country has been really preventative. We have been trying to focus on all of the tools at our disposal to prevent additional acts of terrorism so that we may be able to prosecute conspiracies to commit terrorism, or as you see here, conspiracy to provide material support for terrorism, rather than actually trying to prosecute bombings that have actually occurred. And in my role as chief of the Terrorism and National Security Unit in the Southern District of New York, that's exactly what we focused on doing, really trying to utilize the tools that we had to bring the material support for terrorism charges because, frankly and thankfully, we haven't had here in New York since 2001 an active crime scene and bomb site. The point of the material support for terrorism statute really is, and I'm going to have to go through this a little quickly because I don't want to keep you here too long, is again to expand the definition of what we can prosecute as terrorism offenses here in the United States. And I must add that the title on the card is former chief of the Terrorism and National Security Unit, which is very difficult for me to say. I did leave the office in August of 2008. That does mean that anything that I do say is not an opinion of the Department of Justice. It is my own opinion, but it is drawn from my experience working there. What we have seen is that the expansion of the material support for terrorism statute, which was originally adopted in response to the Oklahoma City bombing, has expanded over the course of the last decade. Now, material support for terrorism, as it's prosecuted in federal courts here in the United States, includes that paragraph of potential conduct that you see up there. any property, tangible or intangible, or service, including currency or monetary instruments or financial securities, financial services, lodging, training, expert advice or assistance, safe houses, false documentation, identification, communications equipment, facilities, weapons, lethal substances, on and on. Each of those terms, if shown that someone knowingly provided one of those items to a foreign terrorist organization, which is a list that is provided by the State Department based on their own determination, or attempts or conspires so to do, is guilty of a crime. Now, what does that enable us to do as federal prosecutors? Well, as opposed to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which was charged, frankly, under a seditious conspiracy statute, we're able to actually, and it was only the conspirators that we were able to capture here in the United States. What we're able to do is expand the breadth of our investigations to really target and structure our investigations and target our investigations to not only perhaps the gentlemen who are driving the car with the bomb into a particular institution, but the people that provided the material support for that, the logistic support, the expert trainings on how to build the bombs, the money, obviously, to support any travel or the actual equipment to execute the bombing. Any type of support or resources to a foreign terrorist organization is something that we can now prosecute, so long as we can show that there's a U.S. interest in that. There's also a civil component of the material support for terrorism statute, which I will not go into, but it is really and I frankly think it's not utilized often enough, but it's targeted toward any financial institution that has control over any funds that are shown to belong to essentially a foreign terrorist organization. There are strict penalties for that, including any reputational damage to the institution that might result of any proceeding that is brought to try to enforce this particular statute. Now, just a quick illustration, case study of how we're able to utilize this statute to really effectively prosecute those that are known to support terrorism. The case was recently prosecuted in the Southern District of New York of the United States versus Mansour al-Qassar. Mansour al-Qassar was a notorious international weapons dealer, Syrian-born, most recently living in a plush estate in Marbella, Spain. Mansour al-Qassar was prosecuted by the Spanish authorities in the mid-90s for his alleged participation in the hijacking of the Italian cruise ship, the Achille Lauro, in 1985, a terrorist plot that was attributed to the PLF and which resulted in the death of a U.S. citizen and a New Yorker, Leon Klinghoffer, who was a wheelchair-bound passenger aboard the ship. Spain accused al-Qassar with financing the terrorists, and some accounts held al-Qassar responsible for securing the escape of the terrorist cell's leader, Abu Abbas, on one of Qassar's private planes. The efforts in Spain to prosecute Qassar in this plot resulted in an acquittal on the charges against him after several of his co-conspirators recanted their testimony or, in fact, refused to testify. That is a picture of al-Qassar's living room that was not part of the evidence in the Spanish case, but was part of the evidence in a case that was investigated and prosecuted by the United States authorities. The Drug Enforcement Administration initiated an investigation of al-Qassar in 2006, in which al-Qassar, who is known to still engage in international arms trafficking, was targeted on a conspiracy to provide material support to the FARC. The FARC is a designated foreign terrorist organization, a paramilitary organization in Colombia, of which I'm sure you have all heard. The DEA was able to introduce a number of sources to al-Qassar in his living room in Marbella, Spain, during which they negotiated a large weapons deal. During the course of the conversations that were entered into evidence successfully in the recent trial this past fall in Manhattan, it was shown that Qassar knew that the weapons that he agreed to supply to the gentlemen who were working for the DEA were going to the FARC, that he knew that the FARC engaged in terrorist activities, And indeed, Qassar went so far as to introduce the possibility of utilizing surface-to-air missiles and supplying the individuals with surface-to-air missiles, which would be used to shoot down U.S. helicopters operated by U.S. Citizens in support of the Colombian government's efforts to eradicate cocaine, which supports the FARC's efforts in Colombia. I'll just go on. This is a slide showing the specifications for the actual surface-to-air missile missile device that Qassar was willing to supply to the individuals represent themselves to be the FARC. Again, just some more specifications of the device that Qassar was willing to supply, and indeed engaged an arms manufacturer to provide to the individuals that were negotiating with him. This is a list of the various weapons that Qassar, in addition to the surface-to-air missiles, agreed to provide to the sources for the DEA. I'll show you the second one. This is another one. Obviously, it's addressed to Mansour al-Qassar. Particularly interesting is under B, which you probably can't see here, but it says the origin of the goods of Serbia, except for the items marked with a asterisk on the side or a number sign. Those are from Bulgaria. We actually determined what the Bulgarian arms manufacturer would be, and indeed, when the deal went through and Qassar engaged that Bulgarian weapons manufacturer, the supply of these items were actually prepared. That is a photo of some of the weapons that were already engaged to be sent. They were going to be sent by way of boat, which was also selected to Montenegro. A boat was supposed to leave from Montenegro. The boat was identified. Again, specifications of the boat that were provided by al-Qassar to the DEA sources. A picture of the actual boat that in fact did exist and was prepared to engage in the weapons deal that Qassar had agreed to with the individuals representing themselves to be commanders in the FARC. Finally, what occurred was that there were plans to meet in Romania to finalize the deal. Qassar was supposed to travel to Romania with two of his co-conspirators to do that final deal. The two co-conspirators went to Romania. They were arrested in Romania as part of some of the international cooperation that we have spoken about here tonight in the course of our terrorism efforts, counterterrorism efforts now. Qassar himself did not travel to Romania. He decided that he was going to stay in Spain, but he was going to travel to Greece, and he was arrested by the Spanish authorities again as part of the international cooperation that we have found increasing over the last 5 or 6 years in particular in some of these cases. The three individuals were extradited, two from Romania, Qassar from Spain, and Qassar and one co-conspirator were convicted in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan federal court this past fall, and they were just sentenced 2 weeks ago to Qassar was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and his co-conspirator Tarek Alghozi was sentenced to, Felipe Moreno Godoy was sentenced to 25 years in prison for their participation in this conspiracy to provide material support to the FARC. Again, no weapons ever changed hands, thankfully. That boat never pulled out of port without any weapons on it because we were able to prevent this from happening. One of the things that was interesting that was found in Qassar's possession was a passport from Argentina, which he was attempting to travel on. I only took a couple of pages of it, but it is a passport that was in Qassar's possession when he's arrested, and thankfully he wasn't able to use it to escape Spain. And as I said, Qassar is now in the custody of the United States, serving a 30-year sentence. So it's just a quick example of what we in the United States have done on the criminal side, again, with the help of our international colleagues, to try to really expand what we can do, knowing that the effort against terrorism isn't just the people who actually physically go into a location and commit the bombing, but are the ones that actually provide that terrorist cell with all the support they need to actually execute their plan. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callan. And now I'd like to call on our speaker, Harlan A. Levy, partner of Boyd Schiller and former major crime prosecutor in the Office of the Manhattan District Attorney. Mr. Levy.
Thank you. Good evening. I know the hour is very late, and I promise you that I will rival Consul General Sharif's comments for their brevity, if not for their quality. I'd like to start with something that Mr. Nisman mentioned when he talked about there having been a bank account where important sums of money were transferred from Iran in the weeks before the bombing at the AMI Center in Argentina. And in focusing on that, I want to talk briefly tonight about money, because money is the mother's milk of terrorism, and about banks. We're here tonight in the financial capital of the world, and we all recognize that people who commit terrorist attacks need money. They need it for materials, they need it for travel, they need it for safe houses, they need it to pay the families of suicide bombers. That money sometimes moves through banks. It moves through banks that provide banking services for terrorist organizations, and it also moves through banks that serve as banking institutions for charities that are frequently fronts for terrorist organizations. It's now less than 2 weeks since my former boss, Robert Morgenthau, announced that he would not seek re-election as the Manhattan District Attorney. Mr. Morgenthau has been a great friend of the State of Israel, and he's also been a leader on Holocaust-related issues. And I think that it's significant that his tenure as Manhattan DA was distinguished, among many other things, by a focus on banks and the way that money moves through New York banks for unlawful purposes. And there are 3 things that I want to note tonight about banks and their conduct as it relates to international terrorism. First, Mr. Morgenthau just this year concluded an investigation of Lloyds Bank. Lloyds Bank is a British bank, and what Lloyds Bank was doing in an investigation that concluded early this year was unlawfully stripping financial information from wire transfers, which showed that money that was passing through New York originated in Iran. That money was being used, among other things, to buy technological materials. Lloyds Bank this year was required in an agreement with the Manhattan DA's office to pay $350 million. And as part of that agreement, it said that it would examine all the transactions that it stripped to try to determine where the money was headed and to report back to the district attorney's office. The second thing that I'd like to note in terms of a focus on banks is bank secrecy, which also was a long-term concern of my office and of District Attorney Morgenthau. You know, it's really an outrage. There are many jurisdictions in the world that premise their entire banking industries on bank secrecy. These are jurisdictions that, as part of getting business, brag that they have no regulations and that they have no taxes on the deposits in their jurisdictions. And these are jurisdictions that engage in enormous banking transactions. The Cayman Islands, for example, has $700 billion on deposit. That's more than twice as much money as is deposited in all banks in the New York City area. This issue of bank secrecy and of the interrelationship of bank secrecy with an inability to ensure bank responsibility was a major focus of the Manhattan DA's office, and I think it's very important that that continue to be a focus of the District Attorney's office after Mr. Morgenthau, and also that it be a focus of international concern and reform. Finally, I'd like to follow up on a point that relates to Eddie O'Callahan's point. Eddie talked before about how there are federal statutes that allow people to go after people not just criminally, but also civilly when it comes to international terrorism. And in that regard, I'd like to note a very significant development in the federal courts of this country relating to the responsibilities of banks. There is a noteworthy 2007 decision from a federal court in New York that says that Arab Bank can potentially, that's the name of the bank, Arab Bank, it's a major worldwide bank, can potentially be held liable for its role in aiding international terrorism in Israel. I want you to think about it. I want to be very clear about this. The decision says that a bank can be held liable in federal court in New York for terrorist activities in Israel when it knows that it's acting as a bank for terrorist activities. This is in civil lawsuits. The case against Arab Bank and the litigation itself is still pending, but a federal judge has held that the charges are legally sufficient and the case can go forward. The case against Arab Bank was based on a federal law known as the Anti-Terrorism Act. The Anti-Terrorism Act allows private lawsuits by American victims and their survivors against banks and other institutions that provide material support or resources for terrorist acts. The federal court in that same Arab Bank decision also recognized that foreign nationals, not just U.S. citizens, but also foreign nationals, can sue Arab Bank for violations of, quote, the law of nations under a law from the late 18th century known as the Alien Tort Statute. So in closing, I'd like to note that a focus on accountability by banks is one of the many legacies of Robert Morgenthau. And I would also note that the Federal Anti-Terrorism Act provides a means to say to those banks that may otherwise operate at the margins, be responsible or you may be held liable in our courts in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Dr. Marti, since my Spanish is deficient to the point of being non-existent, I would ask if you would invite Dr. Nisman and yourself to come up here, please, for presentation. It's difficult to honor a person such as Dr. Nisman, who, as I said before, is not just a lawyer who gets up, goes to work, and tries cases, but takes on a tremendous responsibility. And Dr. Marti, I'd like to hold this.
Yeah, I want to present you with a proclamation from the college. And it reads as follows: whereas the greater community of Borough of Queens, tenaciously dedicated to justice and the protection of the rights of the individual, have gathered here this night at the Kuffenberg Holocaust Center at Queensboro Community College to honor Dr. Alberto Nisman, a special prosecutor on terror of Argentina, and those who serve with him in their quest to bring to justice the perpetrators of the AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires. And whereas in 1994, the AMIA Center in Buenos Aires, Argentina, was bombed by terrorists, murdering 85 persons and wounding 151, the world has cried out for justice in seeking to apprehend those individuals who planned and carried out this murderous attack. These cries were met with a silence of indifference and obstruction, equally as murderous as a terror attack. Whereas after more than a decade of governmental silence and intransigence, Dr. Alberto Nisman, Argentina's general prosecutor in charge of the Special Investigation Unit investigating the attack, armed with a sense of compassion and understanding of the worth of every individual and the need to preserve human dignity, brought a shower of light to this heinous crime, and in doing so revealed to the world the complicity of a terrorist organization in perpetrating this act. And therefore, we, the members, supporters, and family of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center, imbued with a fervent commitment to the understanding and elimination of hate crimes, do now hold up for great honor and appreciation Dr. Alberto Nisman for his actions in pursuit of justice, which has emerged as a yardstick by which all future undertakings will be measured. Thank you very much.
We thank you all for joining us. Good evening.
Thank you. Nice.